Hi, my name is Courtney. I'm the Director of Tapestries, the Memory Support Community here at United Methodist Communities at Pittman. I am a social worker by background, and I have a lot of experience in senior and dementia care, traumatic brain injury, education, and mental health. So basically, all things brain related, as well as personal experience with dementia in my own family. And so I'm just very passionate about dementia care and dementia education. And I hope to pass some of that passion and information on to you in a way that's going to make your lives easier and your loved ones' lives easier and better. I apologize for this format. Typically, these meetings are live. However, I am out on maternity leave right now. And so I had to pre-record some options, which means that you won't have the ability to ask questions live or get additional feedback live, but I do include some contact information at the end. So if you have any other questions or if you have a specific situation you're looking for feedback on, I'll give you the information at the end for who to contact in my absence for that. Also, on that same note, I do have two children kind of living in my lungs. So I may or may not be short of breath at points throughout the presentation today. So please bear with me for that. And so that said, let's move on to today's topic. So today we're talking about safer wandering. Wandering is extremely common for our loved ones with dementia, and it is likely not something that we're ever going to fully put a stop to. So we want to see strategies for making it as safe as possible so that our loved ones can do it when they need to. So, is your loved one a wanderer? If you are fortunate enough that you are in the early stages or that you haven't seen this behavior yet from your loved one, you may be one of the lucky few who doesn't have to contend with this. But wandering is common with most types of dementia. It is a very common behavior. And so warning signs that your loved one might wander, even if they're not doing it now, might wander in the future, especially if they're in the very early stages, include returning from a routine walk or drive or ride later than they usually would. So if your loved one takes a walk around the neighborhood every day or drives to the local grocery store every week, and they're getting back later and later, that might indicate that they're actually getting lost and it's taking them longer to find their way home. So that's definitely something that we want to be attuned to, particularly if they're driving, since there's a lot more capacity for them to get pretty severely lost and to be a danger to themselves or other people. Now, throughout the course of dementia, other things that might be warning signs that our loved one is going to wander include expressing feelings of being lost or even actually getting lost, even in familiar places. So maybe your loved one is sitting in the living room and they need to go to the bathroom and they accidentally walk into the kitchen. Maybe they're expressing like, I just feel so confused. I don't know where I'm going, even when they're in really familiar, comfortable areas for themselves. They might be talking about past obligations. So I hear a lot of residents like, oh, I'm going to be late for work if I don't leave right now, even if they've been retired for 20, 30 years. Some will say like, oh, I've got to pick up the kids. They're going to be done school soon. And like, you're their kids. You're probably not in school still. And if you are, you're probably capable of getting yourself home. But they're still imagining you as a little child and thinking that they're responsible for your well-being. So if they're talking about those obligations, that's a sign that they may go out and look for those things, that work, that school, that whatever. If they're expressing interest in going home, even if they're already home, Sometimes this is because they're looking for a home they remember that isn't their, their current home. Sometimes this is just that feeling of lost and being confused, and their brain trying to make sense of it. And it says, well, if I feel lost and if I feel confused, then I must not be home, even if the place looks familiar. And I have had residents say, like, this looks a lot like my house, but it's not. I don't know what's wrong, but it's not, and so we do hear them voice that confusion, and that might prompt them to go out looking for the correct home. If we see a lot of restlessness, pacing, fidgeting, or repetitive movements, that can be a sign that our loved one may wander. It's just saying they've got a lot of pent up energy that they need to release. If they're asking about loved ones or friends who have passed away or even are distant, family members that maybe live far away, again, they might be going to physically look for that person. And if they're becoming anxious in crowded or unfamiliar spaces, they may try to wander to find a place where they feel comfortable. And so those are all potential signs. I'm sure there are others. It's certainly a person by person basis, but these are some of the things we see commonly in our wanderers, so that you can be on the lookout for those signs in your own loved one. So how do we reduce the likelihood of wandering? One, we want to ensure that our loved one's basic needs are met. They're not hungry, they're not thirsty, they don't need to go to the bathroom, they're comfortable, they're not in pain, all of those things, because those are things that would prompt them to get up and go looking for a solution. So we want to make sure those needs are met, particularly if our loved one is wandering in the evening or the nighttime hours. We might want to consider reducing their fluid intake, not stopping their fluid intake, because then we can make them prone to dehydration, but reducing their fluid intake as the day progresses, so that they need to go to the bathroom less in those evening hours, in those late night hours, where they might, have less supervision, where you may be asleep and aren't able to attend to them. We want to identify patterns and routine times when wandering is more likely, and structure their routines around that to support them. So that's going to depend on a lot of personal factors. So if you're a loved one, say we have a lot of ladies that used to walk to and from work. They get the urge to walk around 4:30 when they would have been coming home. They get the urge to walk around 8:30 when they would have been going to work. So that's certainly something that comes into play. A lot of times, if your loved one experiences sundowning or increased confusion as the day fades to evening, that's certainly a time when we're going to see more restlessness, more wandering. If there are times where your loved one just is naturally more anxious, say they don't like to be alone at night, things like that, something we want to take into consideration. And then we want to give them things to do at those times to help either address that need. So if they don't like to be alone, maybe that's when we schedule our visits. If that's when they think they should be at work, we want to give them something to do. If that's when they just need to get rid of all that excess energy, maybe we want to take them for a walk at that time, so that we make it productive. Or maybe we schedule other things at that time to distract them from that. So maybe, if they're getting restless and antsy around 5 o'clock, maybe 5 o'clock is dinner time. So we give them something to do. And then, that food coma sets in and hopefully makes them a little more tired and gets us through that stretch that's difficult. Maybe there's a favorite television show. Maybe that's when you can spend more time with them, whatever the case may be. We want to keep them engaged in meaningful activities, including activities of daily living. So like their self-care tasks, getting up, getting dressed, washing up, brushing their teeth, taking care of their hygiene, tidying up their living space, the normal day-to-day things we all do to take care of ourselves. Helping around the house, folding laundry, sweeping, things like that, and entertainment opportunities. Basically the same things that they would do in a normal day if they didn't have dementia, or the things that you and I do in the course of a normal day. So if our loved one has a lot of restless energy and we want to keep them involved in things, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. This might be something like, if your mom was a homemaker, just leave a basket of laundry out all the time. And after she folds it, when she walks away, go ahead and muss it up a bit so that later when she's looking for something to do, she can fold it again. Leave a broom or a mop out where it's visible so that it gives her that cue, like, oh, I can sweep up the kitchen, kind of a thing. If dad was a handy guy, leave a toolbox out. Leave a small project out if he's able to still safely do that, that sort of thing. Where am I? We want to limit opportunities for overstimulation. So something that we see very often for people with dementia is that they have a limited amount of mental energy to expend. And when that amount of mental energy reaches its limit, we see increased anxiety, we see increased restlessness, we often see increased agitation and frustration, so they're more likely to lash out or be verbally or even physically nasty at that time. So we want to limit those things to reduce those feelings of like, I gotta get out of here. So that means we're going to be mindful of areas with a lot of noise. We're going to be mindful of crowds, even in our own home. If you have family from out of town and they're coming, and it's 2 grown-ups and 3 kids, and mom or dad isn't used to that, that might be a little overwhelming. So you might want to give the kids something to do while they visit with the grown-ups and then swap places, something to that effect to help limit that overstimulation, or keep those visits short so that we're attending to their cues. And when they start to seem a little overwhelmed or a little tired or a little frustrated, we're saying like, okay, it's time to, take a break, whatever the case may be. We also want to attend to changes in routine. So something as simple as scheduling a doctor's appointment might throw them off. Family visiting from out of town might throw them off because that is unusual. So whenever possible, we want to match those things to normal, patterns in their day if we can. If we can't, it is what it is, but we need to know that we need to be extra vigilant in the days following that until they get back on track. We want to use environmental cues to support their routine. And so the most obvious example I can think of for this is lighting. So this is very challenging in a community like ours where there's fluorescent lighting pretty much everywhere. In the residents' rooms, of course, they have their own lamps and the light fixtures are much more homey. But in the care areas and the common areas, there's a lot of fluorescent lighting. And that doesn't really change, throughout the course of the day. Where I'm sure in your own home, maybe in the morning you don't use light, you just let the sun come in the windows. And then, towards the afternoon when the sun is fading, you're turning on lamps. And then as it progresses to evening, even with those lamps still on, there's a little bit of naturally darker or dimmer areas because you're not getting the combination of lamplight and sunlight anymore. And that supports our body's circadian rhythm, our natural rhythm of sleep and wakefulness. And that's something that is really important for our loved ones with dementia, particularly those that sundown, so that it helps maintain a natural awareness of the flow of the day. So we want to make sure that lighting supports that, using night lights at night. Maybe if you've got lights that are on a dimmer, dimming them towards the afternoon and evening, that sort of thing. We can also use other environmental cues, like at dinner time, we're setting the table. so that they know a meal is coming soon because they're seeing the dishes, that sort of thing. Put away items that signal leaving. Okay, so things like purses, wallets, keys, coats, and hats, those items should be kept out of sight, because if our loved one sees those items and thinks, oh, I need my purse or I need my keys, what does getting your purse or your keys mean? It means we're going somewhere. You don't need your keys or your purse when you're hanging out at home. So if we take that visual signal away by putting those items out of sight, it can help reduce the risk that our loved one is going to wander. We want to limit access to keys, and we want to move locks to less visible locations. So that might mean, if you've got a key hook by the door, you might want to move it so that it's out of sight, or stop using it, so that the keys aren't there. Find someplace else to put them. You may want to add a deadbolt either to the very top of the door or to the very bottom of the door, so that when your loved one is naturally going to look at the door and seeing the doorknob, that's not the only lock that's keeping them in and keeping them safe. And because it's, outside of their normal scope of where they would look, they're less likely to notice it, and it keeps them from getting outside. And we may want to consider, especially if we've had problems with our loved one wandering before and leaving the house before, we may want to consider additional safety measures, including things like door alarms. So like that can be as fancy or as unfancy as you want, even like the magnetic dollar store kind where you just like stick them to the door frame, and when the door opens and breaks the seal, they let off a chime. That works. Pressure sensitive mats are a great option. So that might be something you use, especially at night, put on the floor beside their bed, so that if they wake up in the middle of the night and get out of bed, that mat is letting you know they're up so that you can take action. Even to such an extent as a GPS device. So this might be something that you put on them, like a bracelet or a watch, that alerts you on your cell phone where they are. This might be something that you clip onto their clothing. There's a lot of different options. There's a lot of great resources. If you want to check out the Alzheimer's organization website, they have a store that has a lot of really specialized options. So you can check that out if that's something that you feel that you need for your peace of mind and for your loved one's safety. So in-home wandering, and how do we make that safe for our loved one? In-home wandering is certainly easier to regulate than outside of the home wandering. So when we think about in-home wandering safety, it's really about how do we reduce tripping hazards? How do we, keep them occupied? How do we make sure that they're less likely to be injured, in the process? So one, we want to have someone available for in-home supervision and reassurance. This is, if it's possible, if your loved one lives alone, you might want to see if you can find companionship, or if you can plan to be there at those times of day when we know they get more restless. If you're able to be with your loved one, or if you're fortunate enough to have around-the-clock care, it's really just about making sure that person is attending to their needs. And if they are, say, looking for that loved one that's passed on, or thinking, oh my gosh, I have to get to pick up the kids, that there's somebody there to reassure them and say, it's okay. You don't have work today. You're not on the schedule. Or, oh, the babysitter already picked up the children. They'll be home after dinner, kind of a thing. Whatever makes sense. We want to be mindful that just because they might need supervision and support at times does not mean They need to have eyes on them at all times. We still want to respect their need for privacy. We still want to respect their need for downtime. This is about a happy middle ground where your loved one has support when they need it, but also doesn't have to deal with somebody all the time. Think about how you would feel if someone just followed you around constantly. It wouldn't be very comfortable. And so we want to be careful, especially as our loved one progresses in their dementia, to avoid that thinking trap of like, but somebody has to be with them. No, privacy is a natural human need. And as long as they're able to be safe and there's a person nearby in case something happens, we really don't need to, like be their shadow all the time. It's not realistic, and it's probably going to aggravate them. We want to keep walkways wide, clear, and well lit. So area rugs, extension cords, if you have a lot of furniture, things like that. Like, I know this generation, the Great Depression generation, a lot of them tend to be hoarders, or even if they're not hoarding things in the traditional sense, like keeping a lot of stuff they don't need, maybe they just have very densely furnished rooms, lots of knickknacks, items on every surface, that sort of thing. We may want to gradually reduce that as their mobility changes, so that there's less for them to trip on, less for them to walk into, less for them to knock over and break and hurt themselves on, that sort of thing. We want to make sure that if our loved one is wandering at night, that hallways, bathrooms, and bedrooms have night lights. Maybe kitchens, if they're the kind of person that gets up and goes to the kitchen for a midnight snack or a drink of water, that sort of thing, so that they're able to see where they're going and have that increased safety. We want to create opportunities for passive engagement. So, in a previous slide, I talked about like keeping them busy, making opportunities to do something with them. And those can be things that are just sitting around. Those can also be things you're doing with them, to keep them busy. Passive engagement is more things they're able to do on their own at any time, day or night, regardless of the circumstances. So that is leaving around a rummage area. You probably don't want mom or dad rifling through important papers because you don't want them to get lost or damaged. But you can put some outdated, important looking papers, maybe where they always kept the mail, so that when they feel the need to go look through that pile, there's a pile there for them to look through and interact with. That's not going to cause any damage, but is going to get them that sense of fulfillment. Again, maybe that's a toolbox. Maybe that's a basket of yarn if mom was a crocheter. Maybe that's art supplies if they were crafty. Whatever the case may be, you're going to tailor that to your parents' need or to your loved one's need. Maybe that's leaving around puzzle tables or puzzle books. So as they're strolling, they can stop and throw a few pieces on it. Or they can say like, oh, let me do that word find right now, and have a place to sit and do that. The visual cue of just making it so that it sits out and is accessible gives them something to do to help calm the wandering. Baskets of laundry, big ones, especially for our ladies who were homemakers for a lot of years. That's something you can leave out constantly. Whether it's a handful of clothes that really don't get worn anymore, that are clean, and you can just, unfold them again every now and then, so they always have something to do. Or whether you're using their actual laundry and just, keeping that cycle going, so that there's always something for them to do, whatever makes sense for your loved one or your family. We want to consider signage with visual cues about what each door is for. So if this is a household where you keep the bathroom door closed, put a picture of a bathroom on the bathroom door. They've lived there for a long time. They know where the bathroom is, but as the dementia progresses, they may not. And especially if that door is closed and they're not getting that visual cue of seeing the tub, the sink, the toilet, they may forget what's in that room. And then we can run into issues where they're going to the bathroom in inappropriate places, like maybe a trash can or a potted plant, not so pleasant. Same for their bedroom. Put a picture of a bed on the door so that they know that's where they're going. On exit doors, you might want to put stop signs. It's a familiar visual cue, especially if your loved one has driven in the past. It's a readily accessible cue that says, oh, not supposed to go out this door. If you're fortunate enough to have an outdoor backyard, or a yard area, especially one that's enclosed, maybe you put a picture of the backyard on that door, or, a picture of trees and flowers, something that signifies this is a door to outside and a door that we can safely use to outside. And if possible, we do want to create and allow access to enclosed outdoor spaces. We want to do this for a couple of reasons. One, nature is very soothing and calming to the nerves for a lot of people. So we want them to have opportunities to go outside. Two, if our loved one is angry or upset and they just need that sensation of storming out, maybe they're even saying, I got to get the heck out of here, kind of a thing. If we have an enclosed space where they can safely walk out the door and we don't have to worry about them because we know there's a fence, all the better for it. There are lots of ways to create enclosed spaces. If you have the resources to, put in a fence, great. If not, sometimes you can use like other natural barriers, lawn furniture, potted plants, garden boxes, that sort of thing, to make it harder for them to get out so that they do have a place they can go when they need that outlet, but that doesn't give them access to, say, the street, the sidewalk where they're going to walk away. All right, outside home wandering safety. This is significantly trickier. Okay, it's a much bigger area. There's a lot more variables. And so if our loved one especially is the kind of person who is constantly trying to get out of the home, we really need to be mindful about creating opportunities for outdoor activity. Again, either in an enclosed space or with appropriate supervision. So maybe that means you're taking them for a walk every day. Maybe that means, that there's a garden for them to kind of sit in and maybe even putter or plant in. If you're able to, if safety and weather conditions permit, when you take them for a walk, allow them to dictate the path of the walk. Or if you take them for a drive, and let's say you're going for an aimless drive, every time you get to an intersection, ask them which way they'd like to go. That's important because it might give you a clue if they ever get out without your supervision. Maybe there's some consistency to it, and it gives you a clue as to where to start looking for them if, the worst should happen. Some research shows that most people will follow their dominant hand. So if your loved one is right-handed, they're going to generally make a series of right turns. If your loved one is left-handed, they're going to generally make a series of left turns. So that's a potential rule of thumb. But if you can go for a walk or a ride around the neighborhood and let your loved one show you where they would choose to go, not only are you giving them a sense of control in that moment, which makes that moment more enjoyable for them, but it also gives you a clue as to what they might do if something were to go wrong. We want to consider making those opportunities for outside wandering in well-loved and familiar places. So this is the stores they've always gone to. This is their church. This is their favorite restaurant. This is the local park that they enjoy, that sort of stuff. Again, because that breeds familiarity and comfort, it's less disruptive to their routine. It promotes reminiscence, so we can talk about memories that happened in those places, which is a great way to initiate conversation and have that engagement with our loved one. But also because those might be the places they're going if they wander on their own at a time when they really shouldn't have. And it gives us an idea of where to go look for them. When we're planning these types of walks or these types of trips, or even when we're thinking about wandering safely outside in general, we want to be mindful of local hazards, busy roads, God forbid, highway access, wooded areas. A lot of seniors who go missing, when we see those silver alerts, end up in areas that are brushy or wooded because they're falling, there's stuff for them to trip on and then they're getting stuck there, kind of a thing. Water features, God forbid they find a pond and they fall into it, that sort of thing. Bus stops where they might get on the bus. All of those are things that we want to make sure we know where they are. We are creating barriers to getting to them if we're able to, and that we're aware of the risks and hopefully avoiding those risks on our routine outings with our loved one, so that maybe they're less likely to choose those paths when they do go out. We want to talk with neighbors, friends, and family about potential risks and give them our contact information. So if you live in a neighborhood, like a traditional neighborhood, you've got a good relationship with your neighbors, or even if you don't really have a good relationship with your neighbors, but they're there, you might want to go, to a house or two on either side, maybe a couple across the street, even on some of the street corners, and just say, like, if you can bring mom or dad with you, great. If not, have a picture of them that's recently updated and say, hey, we live in the area. This is my mom. This is my dad. Sometimes they wander. If you happen to see them out and about without someone with them, please, here's my cell phone number. Please give me a call. It's a great way to promote safety when you can't have your eyes on them. You never know. And especially if you live in a community where maybe you've got some retired neighbors that are constantly out in the yard, things like that are going to be more vigilant, use that resource. We also want to alert local police and local businesses much in the same way. Give them a picture of your loved one. Let them know they have dementia, they may wander. If you see them, please call me. With the police, give them the picture, your phone number, and your address. If you see them, please call me and bring them back here. That's something that they can do. So those are all things that we can do to help make the situation a little bit safer. When we think about how to respond to wandering, first and foremost, we want to be mindful of our tone and our approach, especially if our loved one has gotten out and is wandering at a time when we weren't there to supervise them or no one was there to supervise them. We might be in a state of stress or panic, but that should not convey in our tone with our loved one if we can at all help it. So we don't want to startle them. We don't want to condemn the behavior. We don't want to make them feel as though they've done something wrong. And we don't want to make them feel as though they're unsafe with us, because that might make the situation worse. It might upset them. It might make them angry, which is going to cause them to storm off and make the problem way worse. But we also just don't want to embarrass them. So if you're running up to them like, oh my God, I've been looking for you everywhere. You need to come home now. Get in the car. Like, now they feel reprimanded like a child. Maybe they feel ashamed. Maybe they're upset with themselves for causing you distress. Those feelings of upset can translate into more restlessness that's going to actually cause them to wander more. And even if it doesn't, it can just be discomforting in the moment and can set you up for a rougher day, a rougher evening with your loved one. We want to consider the type of wandering when we think about how we want to respond. So if our loved one is doing just cheerful exploratory wandering, particularly in the house, if they're kind of happy and they're moseying along and just like looking through things here and there, maybe checking out pictures or flipping through a book, standing and watching the TV for a minute and then walking off and finding something else to do. That's okay. They're happy. It's not a problem. They're safe. It's not a problem. But if we want to engage with them at that time, maybe we say, looks like you're having a nice walk. Can I come with you? And just kind of go with the flow and make casual conversation. When they pause at the television, talk to them about whatever's on. If they pick up a book or a picture to flip through, like that kind of thing, talk to them about what's going on in the book, what's going on in the picture. That's great opportunities to build, positive engagement and keep them involved in conversation. If we're seeing rummaging or tidying behaviors while they're walking, like where it's purposeful and kind of task oriented, we may want to offer assistance. Hey, can I help you with that? And now you can go with them. You can ensure their safety as they're doing that task. You can make sure that that task they're doing is safe in a way that seems natural and conversational, rather than in a way that seems reprimanding or parenting, where we're treating them like a child. No. We might want to make mental notes of the types of things that they enjoy doing at those times. So what is it that they're rummaging through? Maybe we create spaces for them to do that here and there throughout the house. So if they're fixating on photo albums, put a couple of photo albums here and there throughout the house. If they're fixating on mail, put a couple piles of mail around the house. If they're looking at a newspaper, same thing. If they're looking for something to do, if they're rooting through a trunk drawer, maybe you put a basket or a drawer, full of random odds and ends for them to look through in different locations. It might also give us an opportunity if they've moved things while they're rummaging or they're tidying, which we do see. A lot of our residents will put things in a safe space, like tuck it under their mattress or hide it in a winter coat in the coat closet kind of thing. And then later they're like, I can't find it anywhere. It must have been stolen. If you're going with them through that process, you can make a mental note of where they're putting things so that you know where it is, where to look for it, and can put it back later. Also very helpful, reduces a lot of stress. And if we see purposeful wandering of a different kind, this is, I'm looking for my mom, I'm looking for my husband, I'm looking for my children, I need to go to work, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to be late to church, whatever it is that they're saying, even if what they're saying is not true. Maybe they're looking for a parent or a spouse that's deceased. They haven't been to work in years. They don't go to that church anymore, or they've moved and they're trying to go to their childhood church, but that's not the one they go to now. That sort of thing. We want to use that as an opportunity, again, to engage with them and reminisce about that person, about that place, about that activity. So if they're looking for mom, they're looking for their husband or wife, tell me about them. How did you meet? What did you like about them? What do you remember? Where did you go for dates? Whatever the case may be. Give them opportunities to fill in the blank. Preferably, we're using open-ended questions that allow for a lot of translation, a lot of different interpretation, so that they can respond in the way they're comfortable with, rather than questions with one right answer. So, what did you like about dad is better than what's your anniversary? What year did you get married? Where there's a concrete answer and they may stress themselves or get upset if they don't remember. If we ask a more general question, we give them more opportunity for success, more flexibility in how they can answer. Same for work. If they're looking for work, what kind of work do you do? What do you like about your job? How's your boss? How are the people you work with? Like that sort of thing. That's a great opportunity to learn more about your loved one and to give them opportunities to support their own memory. We may at those times need to go on the journey, so if they're looking for someone who's deceased, you may not want to say to them, oh, they're dead, and hopefully you would say it a little nicer than that, but they don't necessarily need that reminder. If your loved one is in the early stages and you can have that conversation with them comfortably, by all means do so. But odds are good if they're looking for that person, it's a good sign they don't know that that person is passed anymore, even if they once did know that. And so rather than giving them a distressing truth, we can either distract them by like, tell me about them. Or we want to go on the journey and say, oh, I haven't seen them. They went to the store, they went to work, they'll be home in an hour. Maybe let's do something else while we wait, that kind of thing. And it's okay to play along. That can feel a little strange, because for some of us, especially if we're particularly truthful, it feels weird to, kind of tell almost a lie to our loved one. But again, a comfortable lie is better than a distressing truth they aren't going to understand and they aren't going to remember. If they're not going to remember that that person has passed away, and you're going to have to remind them again in 10 minutes, and they're going to be upset about it again in 10 minutes, and they're going to be upset about it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, do you really want to make them upset all those times? And so that's how we have to think about it when we think about that therapeutic fibbing, to help us find more peace with it. Also, it just reduces the risk of conflict, because every now and then, certain people, you'll tell them, oh, that person passed away. And they'll get very indignant and say, no, they didn't. I just saw them an hour ago. And now they're angry with you. They don't trust you. And so we want to avoid that situation as well. And when we are finding our loved one wandering and we're accompanying them on wandering, we want to make sure that we're attending to their physical needs. So if our loved one has, decreased mobility, if they have struggle with balance, we want to make sure that their walker or their cane or whatever assistive device they use is with them when they wander. If their legs tend to get tired and give out, maybe they've had a lot of falls, we want to make sure that we're encouraging them to sit down here and there, whether that's a prompt we're giving them, like, hey, let's sit and take a break, or whether we're just putting seating areas every so often so that they can choose to take a break when they want to. If our loved one especially struggles with something like diabetes, where low blood sugar might be an issue while they're walking, we want to make sure that they're well fed, that we've got snacks handy. And particularly if they're walking outside, we want to make sure we've got snacks, we've got water, keep them hydrated, especially in the summertime. If it's really hot and they decide they're going to go for a walk, they might not feel that they're hot because the elderly tend to be very cold most of the time. And so that heat feels good to them, but just because it feels good doesn't necessarily mean it's good for them. They're still prone to things like dehydration, like sun exposure, like heat exhaustion, that we can prevent by making sure they're well hydrated and well taken care of. And we want to do that in a way that respects their dignity. So we don't want to be like, Mom, you need to sit down now, you're going to fall. We don't want to be embarrassing. We don't want to be directive. We don't want to treat them like children. But we can say like, oh, I could use a break. You want to sit down with me on this bench for a minute? In a way that feels more natural and still accomplishes the goal. And last but not least, what do I do now? What happens if the worst happens and our loved one has wandered and we have no idea where they've gone? This is absolutely a terrifying situation. It's going to, really stress you out. You're going to likely be in a panic. You're going to race to the worst case scenarios. And so you need to have a plan for what to do if this happens. First and foremost, as challenging as it is, try to stay calm. Take as many breaths as you need to get control of that initial moment of panic. This is going to do a couple of things. One, it's going to help you think more clearly about what to do next, which is important, because if our loved one really is gone, every moment counts. And two, trying to stay calm is going to improve our energy so that when we find our loved one, we aren't stressing them out, because for us, this is a moment of terror, but for them, this might just be a casual walk, and when we find them, it may be that they think it's not a big deal at all. And if we're like, or like, oh my God, are you okay? We're going to startle them and maybe make them feel undermined or childish. And if they do get out and they're walking and maybe they are lost and scared, we need to be calm so that they feel reassured. So regardless of what that dynamic is, us being calm is going to make the situation better for them. So that's very, very challenging, but very, very important. Try to stay calm. Next, we immediately want to begin searching. And, we don't want to wait and say like, oh, maybe they come back. Because every minute we delay is a moment they could be hurt, they could be more lost, they could be in a dangerous situation. And we want to make sure that when we're searching, especially if we're starting in the house, that we're starting by checking seldom used areas of the home. Maybe they pretty much only wear a path back and forth between their bedroom, the bathroom, and the living room. But suddenly we want to check things like the laundry room, like the garage, like the guest room, that you might not think of because they might have zigged when they should have zagged and ended up in a strange space. And so it sounds silly, but if you're running outside to look for them in the neighborhood and they're in the laundry room, one, you're looking for nothing, and two, they might need your help at home, while you're out panicking. And so I have seen this happen where, a resident took a wrong turn. And so we have lots of bedrooms. They took a wrong turn. They found somebody else's room, mistook it for their own, laid down and went to sleep. And we're looking for them everywhere else. And here they are resting comfortably in the room right next door to their own. So really make sure you check every room, every closet. It sounds silly, but they may very well still be in the home, just in a space you don't expect them to be, which is really a best case scenario. Once we've cleared all areas of the home, we know they're not there, then we want to start widening our search to outdoors. If our loved one has been missing for more than 15 minutes, this is a good time to notify the police. You're going to let them know that your loved one has dementia when you call them. That's going to let them know that that's why this is a problem, even though it's such a short time. And it's going to let them know kind of a general category of who they're looking for and where to start looking, so that they can start in the areas closest to your house. They know they're looking for a senior alone. They know they're looking for somebody who, may or may not be disoriented, and who they have to approach with caution and care. Preferably, if you've already had this conversation with them, they have a photo of your loved one on file and they know exactly who they're looking for, which is a perfect scenario. Make sure that you're updating that photo regularly as mom or dad changes, so that they have an accurate picture of what they're looking for. And when we're going out to look, for our loved one, we also want to make sure we have at least one up-to-date photo for ourselves. We might keep copies on hand so that we can pass them out. And you're going to want to have your contact information, whether that's you're just willing to give it to people you pass on the sidewalk, whether you're going door to door in the neighborhood. Hey, if you see my mom, if you see my dad, please call me. Whether, you have pictures printed that have your cell phone number already written on the bottom and you're able to just hand them out. You're going to go And if you see people walking around the neighborhood, those neighbors that you've notified, you're going to say, hey, mom is missing. Hey, dad is missing. If you see them, please call me, so that you've got more sets of eyes. If you've got a good relationship with neighbors, maybe they're willing to come out and look with you, all the better. We want to start looking closer to home and gradually widen our search. Okay. We are in our search going to prioritize dangerous areas, those bus stops, those wooded areas, those water features, ponds, lakes, stuff like that. Busy streets, highways, mostly for our peace of mind, just to make sure they're not in any danger. And then we're also going to prioritize those frequently visited areas that they're likely to go. Or if we did take that advice of like letting them dictate the direction we go on walks, follow that path they choose, go to those familiar spots, because odds are good that's where they're going now. So that's how we kind of want to prioritize our time. Start close, move gradually further away, check the familiar places, check the places that you absolutely just don't want them to be lost for long. If they've wandered before, so if you're unfortunate enough to have this be a semi-regular occurrence, you might want to check where you found them the last time. Muscle memory kicks in often, even when cognitive memory does not. And so they may have gone to the same place or be en route to the same place. So if they've wandered before, maybe you head there first, just to help you, have a leg up and where to look for them. And when you find your loved one, approach them calmly as though nothing has happened and redirect them to safety. Okay. So again, we don't want to run up and be like, oh my God, where were you? Oh, I've been worried sick. We don't want to run up yelling at them. We don't want to startle them, because again, if they're calm, we're going to stress them out. If they're stressed out, we're going to make it worse. So either way, we want to approach calmly, even if our heart might be going a mile a minute. We want to redirect them to safety. So maybe you say like, here you are, I've been looking for you. Can we walk together? Let's go this way. And hopefully they're receptive to that. If they're not, it might be, it might take a little bit of walking and conversing with them to get them in the car, or to get them to go back towards home. And make sure if you do have other people helping you find them, that you're instructing them to approach the same way, to approach calmly, to redirect safely. Maybe they take your loved one by the hand and you don't necessarily even give them like, hey, we're going this way now, but you just kind of walk that way and give them a gentle nudge in that direction. That's okay too. And if there are other people that are helping you in the search, or other people that you've notified that mom is missing, dad is missing, police, family members, whatever the case may be, as soon as you're able, contact them to let them know that your loved one has been found. Okay. One, we don't want to waste, especially if we have the police involved, we don't want to waste their resources and their time when they may have other things, other emergencies to respond to. If it's other family members, friends, neighbors involved, we want to make sure that they're not continuing to worry, and that in our relief, we forget to relieve them as well. So we want to make sure that we've notified them the person is safe. So hopefully this gave you a few ideas of how you can safeguard your loved one's home, how you can, make wandering in the home a little safer, how you can be prepared for wandering outside of the home, and how to respond if the worst happens. If you have any questions, I am, as I said, still on maternity leave, so I'm not available right now, but you can feel free to reach out to Pam Garofolo, who is our corporate director of Tapestries. She's my direct supervisor. She is a wealth of dementia education and experience, and she is happy to be available to talk to you about any questions you might have, any specific circumstances to your loved one, whatever the case may be. hopefully when we meet next month, I'll be back live. I'll have, by then I should have given birth to my 2 baby boys and I'll be ready to return to work. So I hope to see you next month in person. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Have a lovely day.